The swelling in Gideon Marsh's leg had grown to the size of a man's fist, angry, hot to the touch, and pulsing like it had a heartbeat of its own. That morning, just as the horizon began to blush with the first light of day, the swollen mass split open, not with a clean rupture, but a slow, tearing agony that made Gideon grit his teeth and stagger. And what oozed out wasn't blood or pus, it was something else entirely. A viscous yellow fluid, thick and foul-smelling, spilled down his leg. Suspended in it were tiny metallic fragments, barely the size of grains of sand, but they caught the morning sunlight and flashed like sharpened silver. 3 months earlier, it had begun as a small bump above his left knee. Nothing alarming, nothing that worried a man who'd broken ribs, stitched his own hand, and set his own wrist once, in a thunderstorm with only a length of fence wire and whiskey, working alone on his remote patch of land deep in the hard country. Gideon had figured it was just another bruise from hauling fence posts, or breaking up a stubborn steer. He'd ignored it. Of course he had. The nearest town was a punishing 2-day ride across dry ravines and thorn-choked valleys, and men like Gideon didn't ride for help unless they were dying. But this was no ordinary bruise. Each morning the pain grew deeper, more insistent. The lump swelled until the skin stretched thin and discolored, first a dull yellow, then a deep, sickly purple, like rot setting in under the flesh. By the time it had grown too painful to ignore, it had already begun to throb with a strange inner pressure, like something alive was pressing outward, aching to break free. Still, he kept quiet, kept working. The ranch wouldn't run itself. The cattle didn't care about his limp. And Gideon had made peace with the kind of solitude that let pain fester unseen. Boone Carter, his nearest neighbor, lived 15 miles east, and even then, their friendship was a sparse thing, more trading than talking. Boone came by once a month with supplies, news, and the occasional bottle of something strong. But Gideon preferred the company of horses and wind. The growth changed. That's what finally gnawed at him. It wasn't just swelling anymore. It felt aware. Some nights, the pain would wake him, not sharp but deep, like something shifting under the skin. He would press his hand to the bulge and swear it moved. That morning, he dragged himself out to check the troughs, favoring his good leg. The sun hung low and cold behind pale clouds. He'd just bent to examine a broken stretch of fence when the skin on his leg tore with a sickening, wet sound. He gasped, stumbling back. The thick yellow fluid poured out, running down into the grass, darkening his boot, and in that liquid shimmered those tiny metallic fragments, slivers of something too uniform to be natural. Each one gleamed identical, in shape and size, like they'd been crafted rather than formed. Gideon stood stunned, a slow horror crawling through his chest. These weren't shards of bone or bits of infection. This was metal, silver, by the look of it, real silver, glinting, and cold. His leg wept the stuff steadily, dripping down with each limping step back to the house. Inside, he found an old jar, dumped out the rusted nails inside, and collected a portion of the fluid. The fragments swirled in it like iron filings in oil. He set the jar in the sunlight, watching how they clumped together, not randomly, but in faint patterns, as if drawn to one another by some unseen force. Then came the knock of hooves on hard dirt. Boone Carter's voice followed, rough and joking. "Gideon, you look like you lost a fight with a bobcat," he called, swinging down from his horse. But the moment he saw the dark stains trailing down Gideon's pants leg and the slit puddle spreading beneath his boots, his face changed. "What in God's name happened to you?" Gideon didn't answer. He just handed Boone the jar. Boone held it to the light and stared as the metallic pieces caught and scattered the sunbeam. His expression shifted, first confusion, then something that chilled Gideon deeper than the morning wind. Recognition. "That ain't right," Boone said quietly. Nothing human should leak something like this. Silence settled between them, broken only by the wind and the distant bellow of cattle. "These look like refined silver," Boone murmured, narrowing his eyes. "Not ore, not raw chunks, refined, shaped." Before Gideon could reply, the sound of wheels and hooves rose from the trail eastward. A wagon, small and fast-moving, was tearing through the dust like it was chasing something, or being chased. Gideon's gut turned. No one should have known. The wound had burst just hours ago, and yet here someone came, with purpose. The wagon halted near the porch in a squeal of wood and leather. An older man stepped down first, every motion efficient, practiced, like a doctor used to making house calls on rough roads. Beside him was a young woman, dark-haired, eyes sharp, a leather bag slung over her shoulder. "Mr. Marsh?" the doctor asked. "I'm Dr. Silas Ward. This is my daughter, Clementine. We were told you're dealing with an unusual condition." Gideon froze. Told by who? Dr. Ward's eyes flicked to Boone, then back to Gideon. Word travels fast when it's strange enough. He gestured to the wound but kept his distance. Boone had moved subtly, positioning himself between the doctor and the jar. "It only happened this morning," Gideon said. That Dr. Ward said nothing. His face was unreadable. Clementine, however, stepped forward without hesitation. She knelt beside the dark stains on the porch, studying them with the intensity of a scholar. "These aren't gallstones or bone fragments," she said, mostly to herself. "They're too clean, too uniform. I've never seen anything like this in anatomy textbooks. Clement," the doctor warned, "step back. We don't know the risk." But his voice was strange, more than worried. Afraid. Gideon caught something odd then, a tremble in the man's hands, and not from age or cold. Dr. Ward reached into his coat and pulled out a vial filled with the same yellow fluid and those same glinting fragments. "You've seen this before," Gideon said, the words barely coming out. The doctor's lips thinned, and for a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he nodded. "There have been others, not many, all kept quiet." His voice was low, heavy. Clementine's eyes flicked up in alarm, but she stayed silent. "I need to ask you something important, Mr. Marsh," the doctor continued. "It may explain everything, or at least give us direction." Gideon said nothing, his pulse loud in his ears. "Have you ever worked near Widow's Creek?" the doctor asked. "Specifically, the Silver Peak mining territory." Gideon felt the words like a blow to the ribs. 15 years ago, he had. For 2 brutal months, he'd worked deep in the bowels of the Silver Peak mines. A hellish place, narrow tunnels, constant dust, and a silence so deep it could break a man's mind. But the pay had been good. Good enough to buy land. Good enough to justify the nightmares. "How could you possibly know that?" he asked, voice low, throat tight. But the doctor didn't answer, not yet. And Gideon understood, in that long pause, that whatever had begun growing inside him hadn't started 3 months ago. It had started years back. And now, after all that time lying dormant beneath his skin, it was waking. Gideon stammered, his voice thin. "Those mines were sealed years ago, after the accidents." Dr. Ward's face turned grim, the lines around his eyes tightening. "They weren't accidents, Mr. Marsh," he said quietly. "They were symptoms." A silence fell, as cold as the mountain wind. Clementine, who had been bent over the sample jar with silent concentration, looked up sharply at her father's words. Her fingers froze mid-motion. "You never told me the Silver Peak cases were real," she said, voice low, unsettled. "I thought they were just theoretical studies, early reports from fringe journals. I hoped they were unconnected." "I hoped so too," Dr. Ward replied, voice thick with resignation. He lifted the old vial he'd brought with him, holding it beside the fresh sample Gideon had collected. Side by side, the fluid glimmered the same sickly yellow, with identical fragments suspended within. But this proves otherwise. The composition, the mineral density, even the formation patterns, they're the same. It's the exact phenomenon that affected 17 miners before the site was officially shut down. Boone stepped forward, his weathered boots heavy on the porch boards, his voice hardening with each word. "Affected them? You mean they got sick? You saying Gideon's got some kind of damn mining disease?" Dr. Ward took a breath. "Those men all had one thing in common," he said. "They worked a particular vein deep beneath Widow's Creek. The silver there wasn't ordinary. It was laced with rare mineral composites and known compounds. Over time, microscopic particulates settled in the body. They embedded in tissue and began growing, accumulating. The process wasn't immediate. It could lie dormant for years." Gideon's hands were clenched so tightly at his sides. The knuckles had gone white. The mountains he'd once worked beneath rose far in the distance, gray and ghostly. What happened to those 17 miners? He asked. Though some part of him already knew the answer, Dr. Ward didn't look at him right away. Instead, he stared toward the horizon where the jagged peaks of Silver Peak loomed, draped in a haze of dust and memory. They tried everything, he said finally. Surgeries, caustic chemicals, folk remedies. Nothing stopped the growths. Every one of them died within months of the symptoms appearing. The air seemed to thin around them. Gideon felt lightheaded, but strangely, not afraid. "So, I'm dying then," he said. But even as the words left his lips, he heard the steadiness in his own voice and felt something else stirring inside him. Not weakness, not decay, strength. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, his limbs felt lighter, clearer. "Not necessarily," Dr. Ward said, his gaze sharp now, analytical. "Your case is different. You're the first I've seen whose growth ruptured naturally. That may have altered the trajectory entirely." Before anyone could respond, a low, rhythmic boom rolled across the plains, then another, the kind of sound that traveled through earth as much as air, followed by the rattle of distant engines. They all turned toward the mountains. The noises grew louder with each passing our grinding gears, the sharp thunder of controlled charges. By midday, a thick gray dust cloud was climbing into the sky from the exact direction of the Silver Peak mines. Someone was working the sealed shafts again. "That can't be," Dr. Ward muttered, his eyes narrowing. They promised those mines would remain closed, swore under testimony after the incidents that they'd never be touched again. Boone had been pacing by the fence line, his shoulders twitching with the buildup of whatever storm brewed inside him. He stopped suddenly and turned. His voice was sharp with anger and something more dangerous, memory. "Doc, there's something I need to say, and you'd best listen close. I've seen these silver shards before, and not in no sick man." Everyone looked at him. Boone glanced at Gideon, then back toward the mountains. "5 years ago," he said, "I passed through Silver Peak Settlement. A drifter came through, not right in the head, but slick in the way only a desperate man gets. He carried a pouch leather, worn at the seams full of tiny silver fragments just like these. Claimed they were the purest silver anyone'd ever laid eyes on. Not mined," he said. "Harvested." Gideon felt a cold weight settle in his gut. "You think they've been mining it out of people?" he asked hoarsely. "I think," Boone said darkly. "Those 17 miners didn't die from no sickness. I think they were murdered for what was growing inside them." The words dropped like lead into the dust, and no one spoke for a long moment. Dr. Ward's face went pale, his hands clenching around the vial until his knuckles cracked. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carter," he managed. "Is it?" Clementine asked softly. Her expression had changed, no longer confusion, but sharp deduction. "If these silver fragments are as pure and identical as they appear, the financial value alone would be staggering. Medical records can be falsified, testimonies buried. If someone realized what those miners carried inside them." She trailed off, her voice heavy with implication. Then came the sound of hooves again, this time not the easy rhythm of a supply rider or neighbor. 6 riders, fast and deliberate, appeared over the ridge, kicking up a tail of dust behind them. They wore the dark, clean-cut uniforms of the Silver Peak Mining Company, and each was armed. The lead rider swung down with too much authority to be questioned. His expression was cold. "Official, Dr. Ward," he called out. "You were instructed to report confirmation the moment you identified symptoms." Ward stepped forward, shielding Gideon instinctively. "The case is more complex than expected. This man is not unstable. He's healing. Removing him now would be premature and dangerous." The foreman's voice was like ice. "Our orders are clear. Any individual showing signs of mineral formation is to be transferred to our medical facility immediately." "Medical?" Boone snapped. "You mean harvested?" The men shifted in their saddles. One's hand fell casually to the grip of his sidearm. The foreman narrowed his eyes. "You're making dangerous claims," he said. "And you're standing on another man's porch," Boone growled. Gideon felt everything sharpening. The wind, the light, the tension. It wasn't fear exactly, it was readiness. "You expect me to go with you?" he asked, voice flat. "You're suffering from a rare and severe condition," the foreman said smoothly. "Our facilities are equipped to help you, the same way they helped 17 others," Gideon said, his tone quiet but cutting. Strange how none of that helped save them. Dr. Ward moved forward again, his voice firm now, laced with authority. "The patient is not deteriorating. On the contrary, he's recovering. Any attempt to remove him could endanger his life." The foreman's lips thinned. "You're under contract with the company, doctor. Your medical opinions fall under our jurisdiction." Clementine stepped up beside her father, chin high. "I'm not under contract, and I'm telling you plainly, if you lay a hand on him, it's assault." The foreman's patience was unraveling. His men began to dismount, spreading out, subtle but unmistakable in their intent. Their weapons remained holstered, but their stance said all anyone needed to know. "This man's condition involves property originating from company mines," the foreman said coldly. "That makes the mineral matter inside him corporate material." No one moved. The sky had gone a hard, unforgiving blue. Dust curled through the stillness. Gideon looked down at his leg, at the stained fabric and the pain that had changed shape. He looked at the silver fragments at what had once tried to break him and understood that they were no longer a curse. They were evidence and proof and power, and the company had come to take it back. The wind came in dry that evening, skimming low across the frozen fields and stirring the ash from dead grass. As though it still remembered fire, the road stretched pale through the hills, a ghost of wagon ruts lined with brittle sage, gravel, crunching under the pairs of small, tired feet. Above them, the sky bruised deep violet with oncoming dusk, while the air turned sharp as tin. A lone crow hopped along a crooked fence post, watching silently as two girls made their way down the final stretch into town. Lady Pearl kept her jaw tight, chin tucked low against the wind. Her coat was too thin, a hand-me-down from Mama that still faintly carried the scent of rose soap and burnt meat. She wrapped it tighter around Junie May, who clung wordlessly to her sister's skirt, her little hand trembling. The child's lips were cracked from the cold, her braids coming loose and uneven. She hadn't spoken a single word since the night their mama died. Behind them was nothing now, just a collapsing shack, smoke long vanished from its chimney, and a baby who never made a sound. Ahead of them lay Dry River, but Letty already knew the river had turned to dust long ago. "Don't look at them too long," Letty murmured as they passed the first porch. A man spat tobacco in their direction. No one waved. Junie didn't even lift her eyes. She just stared at the ground, clutching Mama's old thread pouch with white-knuckled fingers frayed at the seams, stuffed with a rusted thimble and a tin. Drawing pencil dulled by use, they passed the whitewashed church first, its paint peeling and weary. The wind tugged at the bell rope but left it silent. Then came the shuttered schoolhouse, closed till spring. Finally, the saloon, where rough voices hollered behind swinging doors. Laughter erupted, followed by the crash of glass. Letty pulled Junie closer, her hands stiff and protective. They reached Widow Carver's boarding house just as the last of the light drained from the sky. Letty knocked once, firm, then again, softer. No answer came. Junie shivered against her. The door creaked open to reveal a sharp-eyed woman wrapped in a knit shawl and thick with judgment. Her gaze crawled over them, taking in the grime, the raw red tips of their fingers, the absence of a man behind them. "We ain't 10, and we ain't beggars," Widow Carver said flatly. "We're not begging. We're clean, too," Letty replied, lifting her chin. "Just need a place for a bit." "And who's vouching for you?" "Mama's dead. Ain't nobody left to vouch." Widow Carver clicked her tongue and leaned in slightly, squinting. "You Pearl girls, the ones that took sick out by Bramble Creek?" Letty gave a small nod. "We're the only ones left, HMPH, the woman muttered, stepping back without offering the warmth of an invitation. "Town's already talking. Girl died giving birth to a ghost baby. Now her daughter's crawling like rats after the storm." Letty's cheeks burned with shame, but she held her tongue. Just as Widow Carver moved to close the door, a voice drifted from the boardwalk, slow and sure. "That's enough now, Ida." They turned. A man stood at the edge of the general store's porch, lamplight behind him, a biscuit in one hand, and something unreadable in his face. He wasn't old but not young either, maybe 30. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, hands rough and calloused. His jaw looked like it hadn't decided in years whether to speak or remain silent. He stepped down, slowly, eyes never, leaving Junie. She looked up at him like he was carved from smoke. Then, as quiet as snowfall, he knelt and held out the biscuit. Junie didn't move at first, didn't speak, but her small hand, shaking, reached out and took it. For the first time in 2 weeks, she smiled. Letty blinked, her throat catching. Widow. Carver stiffened, muttered something about scandal, and shut the door. The man rose, face still unreadable, and nodded toward the edge of town. You can stay in my bunkhouse, just for the cold nights. Letty hesitated. Her pride bit down hard, but her sister's ribs were showing. What's your name? She asked. Weston Calloway. He replied. I ain't a skinflint. Junie looked up at Letty, still holding the biscuit like it was made of gold. They followed him. The bunkhouse sat behind a leaning barn, beside a crooked row of winter cabbages iced in silver. Weston opened the door and lit a lantern. Inside smelled of pine dust and boiled coffee. A stove crackled low in one corner. One cot, one blanket, 2 crates stacked as a table. On a shelf above, 3 carved animals, a bear, a hawk, and something unfinished. I'll be in the barn, Weston said, setting a tin of water beside the stove. Firewood stacked out back. Then he left. Letty tucked Junie into the cot and brushed a hand over the child's cheek. He don't look cruel, she whispered. Junie chewed slowly, eyes wide. The next morning came gray and bone cold. Weston was already gone, but a biscuit sat wrapped on the crate table. Letty ate one and tucked the other into Junie's hand. The girl nodded, small and solemn. They spent the day cleaning the bunkhouse. Letty swept, then patched the cot with Mama's old thread. Junie drew a little hawk with the tin pencil, silent and focused, the way she once drew Mama's hands while they sewed side by side. At sundown, voices echoed outside. Sheriff says they can't stay, a man muttered near the barn. Weston's a fool, taking in strays. Girl don't even talk. Other ones probably already carrying. Letty's spine stiffened. That night, once Junie was asleep, Letty cried into her hands, face buried in the blanket Weston had left behind. It smelled of sawdust and rain. The next morning, Weston came in with a bucket of apples. He didn't say much, just nodded at Junie's drawing, glanced at Letty once, then went back out. That night, Letty slipped out and walked to the edge of town where the frozen church bell loomed. She stood beneath the black sky and whispered up into nothing, asking Mama what to do now. No answer came. The next day, a knock came at the bunkhouse door. A woman with white hair in a neat bun and polished boots stood there. Miss Addie, the schoolteacher. I knew your mama, she said gently. She used to teach minors' children numbers before they learned to lie. Letty blinked. You did, she sang, too. Played that bent piano in the church until it broke. Junie peeked out from behind a crate. Miss Addie smiled, soft and slow. Your mama used to sing a lullaby about biscuits and stars. You remember? That one. Junie's lips twitched. A sound fluttered in her throat. Not a word, but not silence either. Miss Addie placed a small book on the table. She wanted you both to have better. Then, with her shawl lifting in the wind, she left without another word. After she left, Junie traced the book's letters with her thumb. Letty ran her hand across the worn cover, heart aching and full, but peace didn't linger. The sheriff came. 2 days later, Weston was fixing a fence when the knock came. It was hard and cold. Letty opened the door, Junie behind her. You girls got 3 more days, Sheriff Landry said. Judge's orders, either find kin or you're headed to the state home. Junie's fingers clutched Letty's skirt. There ain't no kin, Letty said. Just us. Then you best make arrangements. Town don't want trouble. He looked past them toward the carved animals on the shelf. His mouth curled like even mercy had turned sour. After he left, Junie silently handed Letty her drawing of the hawk. This time, it held a biscuit in its beak. That night, Weston didn't say a word, just left another biscuit by the stove and split firewood under the moon. Letty didn't know what to do with the ache that left in her chest.